بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. Inshallah, we will continue our Arabic lessons. Just as a reminder, we are studying the book Al-Ajirromyya, which is one of the books that is studied at the very beginning, meaning it is a book for beginners. Inshallah, we will go ahead and actually start the book itself. In the previous lessons, we introduced the book and introduced the author and introduced the science itself. We mentioned the 10 principles of Arabic grammar. And inshallah, today we will actually begin the book by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the mu'allif, rahimahullah, meaning the author, rahimahullah, starts his book as follows. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Al-Kalam huwa al-lafz al-murakkab al-mufid bil-wad'i. وأقسامه ثلاثة اسم وفعل وحرف جاء لمعنى. Speech is a composition of sounds that is beneficial by denotation, and it has three components. So before we go any further, let's break down the statement of the author. Speech, any speech, whether it's English, Arabic, Farsi, Kurdish, Turkish, every speech is a composition of sounds that is beneficial by denotation. What do we mean by denotation? We mean by that the people of that language designated those sounds for the meanings that are being intended. Meaning the sounds that are being used to compose the speech are actually, they actually have meaning in the language that the person is speaking, right? For example, if I come up with a composition of sounds, but those sounds have absolutely no meaning in the language that I'm speaking, that is not considered speech. For example, if I was speaking English and I started saying a, I, U, a, these are a composition of sounds. However, none of these things that I mentioned, none of these sounds that I mentioned are designated for a meaning, for a meaning, right? Or at least not that I know of. So that makes what I said very useless. It makes it just a bunch of sounds, but not necessarily speech. But basically, if I said, for example, I am here, I is designated for a meaning in English, am is designated for a meaning in English, and also here is designated for a meaning in English. Therefore, what I said was a speech. The same thing applies to Arabic, and when it comes to Arabic, those sounds from which speech is composed of, they need to be designated for meanings. Meaning the sounds must have been designated for meanings by the Arabs for us to consider that to be speech. And then وَأَقْسَامُهُ ثَلَاثَةٌ, and the author says the components of speech are three. The parts of speech are three. The main parts of speech are three. اسم وفعل وحرف جاء لمعنى. The first one is al-ism, a noun. And the definition of al-ism, a noun in Arabic, is ما يدل على معنى في نفسه وليس مقترنا بأحد الأزمنة الثلاثة. A word that conveys a meaning by itself and it is not tied to any of the tenses. Meaning, for example, if I said Ahmad, Ahmad conveys a meaning, meaning the person who is called Ahmad, and it's not tied to any of the tenses, right? It's not like a verb that it's tied to the past tense, the present tense. A noun is sufficient by itself. It's not dependent on time. And the second part of speech is al-fa'al, the verb. And in the definition of a verb in Arabic is ما يدل على معنى في نفسه وهو مقترن بأحد الأزمنة الثلاثة. A verb is a word that conveys meaning by itself and it is tied to one of the tenses. Excuse me. Meaning, for example, when you say sat, sat has a meaning of its own, the act of sitting, sat. However, it is tied to one of the tenses, right? Sat means in the past. Will sit means in the future, meaning it's not decoupled from time. It's always integrated and coupled with time. That is a verb. And just a quick, I should have mentioned this earlier. The parts in blue are actually part of the book itself, meaning part of the book Al-Ajirromyya, and obviously the English part are my translations, and the black Arabic parts are also additions, comments that I have added to the PowerPoints, but they're not part of the book itself. They're not part of the book. So that's important to keep in mind. But all the blue bolded sections are part of the book. For example, here, all of this is part of the book, and this is part of the book. So here, I'm just taking this part and breaking it down and explaining each part of speech separately. Okay, and I will also put some links in the description for you know, some translations of the book and the book itself for those of you who want to buy the book. However, in the PowerPoint, I have included the whole book, meaning the blue parts are the you know, are the book itself. So even if you don't buy a book, you can still take this class just by going over the PowerPoints that I am sharing with you in the description. The last part of speech is al-harf, a particle, right? And its definition is ما لا يستقل بالمفهومية, a word that does not convey meaning by itself, and it is in need of the other two components of speech to convey meaning, right? For example, if I say from, just from, right? You know, from by itself doesn't really give you a complete meaning, right? I have to say, for example, I came from school, then from makes sense. Or I have to say, I made this from gold, right? Then from will, you know, will manifest its full meaning. However, by itself, form is insufficient to convey a complete meaning. It is in need of the other parts of speech to convey complete meaning. Right. So these are the three parts of speech, the main parts of speech in all languages, and obviously there are different subcategories that fall under these parts of speech. And here I mentioned some of the mappings. For example, in Arabic, what we call an ism will map to the following in English. An ism could be a noun, could be a pronoun, could be an adjective, could be an adverb, it could be any of these things, right? It could be a place, a person, or a thing. And a verb in Arabic maps, a fa'al in Arabic maps to a verb, right? Maps to a verb, and this is very straightforward. There is a one-to-one mapping. A particle in Arabic, harf, what we call a harf, maps to the following parts of speech in English: preposition, conjunction, and article. And I may be missing some parts of speech, but this gives you a general idea that that what you mentioned are the main parts of speech. However, there are subcategories that fall underneath these parts of speech, right? Now here at this point, the author starts telling us about the signs of nouns in Arabic. How do we determine whether a word is a noun or a verb? or a particle. So he begins by telling us the signs of nouns, meaning if we see any of these signs on a word, we know that that word is a noun in Arabic. Inshallah, we'll conclude here and we'll continue our lessons in the next video. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.